All right, welcome and thank you for joining today's SEED event. I am Nafi Abdullahi, your SEEDS program manager. I will provide technical support for today's event. If you run into any trouble, please use the chat feature to contact me directly. At this time, please use the thumbs up reaction to let me know that you can hear me. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping notes. Today's event is being recorded. Please note that your microphone was muted by default when you logged in. However, you are encouraged to type comments and questions into the chat. All questions asked will be answered throughout the event and at the end of the event. Live captioning is enabled in Teams. You can click the More Actions button, which is the three dots at the top of the screen, then click on Language and Speech, select Show Live Captions, select English, and then click on Confirm. Finally, your feedback is very important to me. At the conclusion of today's event, a link to a brief survey will appear. I would really love to hear what you think so I can continue to improve and update this series. At this time, I would like to introduce our speaker, Ms. Angela Briscoe, Assistant Director with the Houston Regional Office, Veteran Benefits Administration, and she is also a proud Air Force veteran. Ms. Briscoe, we are honored that you are here with us today, and we thank you for your service. The floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, Nafi. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. It is definitely a pleasure and an honor to be before you today. Now, if you can go ahead and go to the next slide. I want to welcome you to the Own It series, Personal Accountability as a Driver of Mission Success. This is a very hot topic, very timely, and something that I hope that you all enjoy. In today's session, we're going to explore what accountability really means, why it matters to our mission, and how each of us can strengthen our accountability practices every day. The goal is to ground ourselves in what accountability really means and explore key behaviors to strengthen accountability and also discuss items that weaken accountability as well. Nafi, you can go ahead and go to the next slide. This course focuses on the essential role accountability plays in individual performance, team effectiveness, and overall mission success. By the end of the course, the goal is to ensure that we're able to define personal accountability and its impact on mission success, recognize behaviors that promote or weaken accountability, apply strategies to strengthen accountability in our daily work, and commit to a personal action plan that supports organizational outcomes. During the course, I also want to ask you to ask yourself a few questions. Does accountability make you feel uncomfortable? Do you associate negative connotations with accountability? And if so, why? And by the end of the course, the goal is to ensure that you feel confident and have practical tools to own and be successful in your space. Next slide. Personal accountability means that we're owning our actions, decisions, and outcomes. It means following through on commitments even when it's difficult. Accountability is a foundation of trust. When people know that you follow through, they rely on you. And when trust is high, teams are stronger, faster, and more effective. The two items that we want to focus on are proactivity and commitment. Proactivity is fundamentally about taking responsibility for one's own choices rather than blaming circumstances or external factors, which sometimes it's easier to do, but we're going to talk about that. And commitment is honoring and ensuring actions align with values that are presented as essential elements of trustworthiness. So simply put, accountability requires us to understand the mission, tasks, and goals, asking why we're here and what our responsibility is. Accountability is also the willingness to evolve and change. Just because we've been doing something that is working, or it's been working for a very long time, doesn't mean that there's not room to grow and change so that we can be better and more efficient. Accountability is an act, and the outcome is what we produce as a result. Did what we do meet the requirement? Did it come back to us as incomplete? And if so, how many times? We must take responsibility by owning our parts, learning from mistakes we made, and continue to grow as a result. As leaders, we also have to be careful in the message we send when it comes to accountability. We may avoid asking an employee to complete a task for fear they won't do it well, giving a pass, and not holding them accountable to performance standards. We may ask an employee to complete a task, but build out an abundance of time for corrections instead of giving feedback and ensuring that our employees are growing and developing and ensuring that they have a displayed ability to support mission requirements. Or we may ask our superstar, we all are guilty of it, our go-to employee, which at times can lead to resentment and burnout. So we must remember how we're balancing accountability. Next slide. Accountability is essential for mission success. When individuals consistently follow through, they build trust and reliability and cohesion. Every role contributes to the mission. When individuals hold themselves accountable, work gets done faster, more accurately, and with fewer roadblocks. Accountability strengthens trust and reliability. In the spirit of transparency, I can use myself as an example and a personal experience. In my past position, I definitely underestimated what the position required. And one of those requirements was biweekly briefings to the Undersecretary for Benefits. Now, in full transparency, my first few briefings were not the best. They were good, but they were not great. I knew that the stakes were high and that I needed to ensure that I was able to convey timely and accurate information as well as answering the questions that would be posed to me. So what I did was reach out to a senior leader that was also involved in this process and the mission and say, hey, I know that my briefings aren't that great. Can we practice? What are some tips and tricks as I'm transitioning into this VACO space? And the senior leader spent time with me after hours. We practiced my briefings, and that was the way that I held myself accountable to my leadership, also understanding that they were making decisions based off of the information that I was briefing. As a result of holding myself accountable, getting feedback, asking the questions, I went from a few bullets on the PowerPoint and briefing to a one slide to briefing the entire deck if my leadership had competing priorities and were not able to attend. What I was able to do was become more confident, hold myself accountable, and build trust so that my leadership knew that I was going to be able to relay accurate information and also represent them well and ensure that we were able to continue to serve veterans. So the moral of the story is don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to get feedback as we're all striving to do better and ensure that we're serving veterans to the best of our ability. So now, Nafi, we can go and display the poll.
And while I'm bringing the poll up, just a reminder, the poll allows you to make a selection, just one. So once you make your selection, you'll go ahead and then press submit, and then the results will show on the screen. So the question of the poll says, how often does accountability impact your team's success? So go ahead and make your selection and we'll see the results. I too will participate. And it looks like there's a huge score in the always category, Ms. Briscoe, while
Yes.
often comes second.
Yes, and I would say that that is good that everybody, or for the majority of us, what do we have, about 94 or so percent that acknowledge that it takes everyone to hold themselves accountable for the team to be successful. And if you acknowledge one point I made earlier was it doesn't matter the position that you're in, every position plays a vital role in the success of our business of serving veterans and administering disability benefits. So always keep that in mind. that we're all a part of a team and we're all accountable to that team's success, okay? Thank you. And next slide. Accountability grows when we show consistency, transparency, and maintain a solution-focused mindset. People who demonstrate accountability follow through, communicate early, and take initiative. Now let's talk about consistency for a moment. Consistency is about showing up, being present, and being value added, and what someone that I used to report to would call being a bobblehead. You all may know what that is, and that is if you're sitting around a conference room, you're in a meeting, and leaders are seeking information from us based off of our subject matter expertise. And there may be information we may be afraid to speak up, and so we sit there and we just nod and we go with the flow. We go through the meeting without speaking up and acknowledging that that's what our leadership is looking to us for. That is what they're depending on us to do because they're making decisions, right, based off of our feedback. So ensuring that we're showing up, that we're present, but most importantly, that we're value added. Secondly, we want to ensure that we're being transparent. We want to be real about the environment without being a roadblock. That's very important. Lastly, when we think about solution focused, we want to always keep in mind, how do we get to yes? It is always one thing to voice a concern and communicate problems, but we also want to be able to present solutions to assist in getting to the yes. Next slide. Now let's transition to look at the opposite behaviors that weaken accountability. These include shifting blame, avoiding responsibilities, and poor follow-through. Recognizing these patterns helps prevent them. Let's talk about each behavior. We have blame shifting. This is a defense mechanism where an individual redirects responsibility for their actions or mistakes onto someone else. It allows them to maintain a perfect self-perception and avoid accountability. Then we have avoidance, dodging the difficult situations altogether, the conversation or one's own feelings as the reality of a situation. Then we have the poor follow-through, a lack of commitment to plans or promises, which can be the symptoms of the same issue. Now, blame shifting, to put it in a context, is saying, you didn't tell me. That may be true. However, the counter would be, but did you ask? So it's always important to ensure that we fill in the holes, that we ask the follow-up questions to ensure that we're clarifying and getting the information. Avoidance. Sometimes we've encountered it with our peers, colleagues. There may be an important deadline, an important meeting, and that person doesn't show up. They're not prepared or ready, which can be very frustrating. Poor follow-through. Over-promising and under-delivering. It's always great if you want to be a superstar, or if you are and do all things. But if the things that you're taking on are half-baked, you're producing not a full product, then you want to step back and reassess your yes. You can sometimes say no and/or find a different way to set realistic expectations and still be successful, which is also a part of being accountable. So ask yourself, which barrier do you see the most in your workplace? And that's something to keep in the back of your mind for the duration of the training. Next slide. Now let's look at our mindset. Proactive versus reactive mindset, always very important. A proactive mindset means that we're taking initiative and planning ahead. We're taking ownership by taking responsibility for our choices, actions, and focusing on what we can control. I'm guilty of it too. I can say that and be transparent, where sometimes information will come down and I have to remind myself, control what you can, take care of what you can, and the rest will work itself out. That's okay. Anticipation, looking ahead to foresee potential problems and taking initiative, making things happen rather than waiting. Secondly, we have a reactive mindset where we're waiting for the problem and we're focusing on the excuses only. We blame external circumstances, we're passive and being affected by our physical or social environment, and we delay. We only respond when events occur. So if we go back and we talk about proactiveness, some of the things and keys to helping us be successful. We're assessing what is to come. We're looking at what's not being done. If we sit and reflect on some of the conversations that have been had in the agency, I'm afraid to say it and surprised, I've been in the agency almost 20 years. And when I think about some of the conversations that used to be had and the things that we used to do that I may see in my workspace where, okay, we're not doing this anymore, but I know that that thing should still be happening, then it's my responsibility to re-engage, make sure we're not dropping the ball, make sure that we say we were going to do something and now we're not doing it anymore. So it's very important to look at what's not being done. Listening, listen to executive discussions, listen to the hearings. Those conversations tell us a lot about what needs to be done and what's coming that allows us to get ahead. Use these things to put processes in place and act before it becomes a hot topic. Now, when we talk about being reactionary, we allow ourselves to be affected by others, or we know what the problem is, but we wait. As a leader, I can say, I love going to my team and asking for something, and I get the response, I already started and I'm working on it because I heard this discussion. Or my team coming to me and saying, this is what I was thinking about starting to work on based off of this information that I have. Would you like to look at it to make sure that I'm going the right direction? That's the type of employee that we all should strive to be, is to be proactive, think outside the box, but pay attention and listen to our environment, to what's happening in our workspace, but most importantly, to the needs of our veterans. That helps us stay on the right track and get out of that reactionary mindset and be more proactive. Next slide. Now let's talk about culture, accountability, and our organizational culture. A strong accountability culture is built on shared expectations, support, communication, and leaders who model behaviors they expect. Accountability isn't just an individual behavior, it is influenced by culture. Specifically, shared expectations refer to a clear, mutually understood set of standards that guide how team members work, communicate, and uphold accountability. Leadership modeling is the practice of leaders demonstrating the behaviors they expect from others. And then we have supportive communication, which refers to open, transparent, and solution-oriented dialogue that helps team members take responsibility without fear of defensiveness. So specifically, shared expectations, we're ensuring that we understand the mission, what our individual responsibilities are, and what our work products should be by seeking feedback. So have you all ever, and I'm sure even if you all raise your hands, how many of us have been in a meeting, we get direction, we're walking out, and everybody before the meeting is over, everybody says, yes, I understand, I got it, I'm ready to go. Soon as the door opens or the meeting is over, you might get an IM or someone, grabs you on the side of the hall and says, okay, what are we supposed to do? What is the expectation? What is the requirement? So make sure that there's an understanding. See, exactly, right? Everybody is feeling that. And that is true. And don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to ask the questions. It's better to ask the question in the meeting than to have to circle back or go to your peer and say, okay, I'm confused. Well, there was an opportunity, right, to do that. So again, don't be afraid, get the feedback. When we talk about leadership modeling, it's very important as leaders to say what you mean and mean what you say. We definitely are the standards that we set. So I can't have an expectation but I don't carry that out myself. So whether it's setting deadlines, whether it is requiring a certain level of work, our employees watch us. And so we have to be careful, but also mindful of what we're displaying, because if I'm requiring excellence of you, then I have to deliver excellence myself. Okay. I want to point out the comment. Thank you for that, Miss Gloria. Sorry to call you out, but I do agree that it is also about being vulnerable. Vulnerability in leadership and accountability is also not being afraid to acknowledge, hey, my bad, or I made a mistake, or let me go back and clarify. And that's actually something that I am going to touch on in a later slide. Additionally, as leaders in the leadership modeling, it's also important for us to be able to make a decision, okay? Make a decision and stand by that decision and stand firm in it. And not saying that sometimes we may make a decision and then go back and have to change. Okay, that's okay. There may be new information or a reason to change course. But again, don't be afraid to deliver the expectation, make the decision, set the time frame, and allow our employees, kind of a blank canvas to execute the thing that we ask. Lastly, when we talk about leadership modeling, and something that I had called out from Ms. Gloria, when we talk about vulnerability, and something that I wanted to share in the spirit of transparency, and something that I learned from one of my mentors and great friend of mine, when we talk about the ability to reflect as leaders. And her and I would go through the duty day, and the next morning, most of the time, we would gather together and meet to plan out our day. And in that, she would always say, Angela, these are the things that happened yesterday, and this is what I think about it. And this is, I might circle back in this conversation because it didn't go really as well as I planned, et cetera. And I would always ask her, what is the purpose of doing that? The reflection piece of it. And she would say, it's always important to think about what worked well the day prior and what didn't go so well. If I communicated something and it maybe wasn't as clear, or I think I may have said something and I think that may have hurt that person's feelings. So I just know that I need to go back and make sure. And that's something that stuck with me when we talk about vulnerability, is I started doing that myself and thinking about, how did I communicate something? Did I say that right? Did it come out a certain kind of way? Or I may think that I communicated something and then I'm like, I might have missed something. And sometimes I will go back to my team and say, this is what I think I communicated to you. Is that what you heard? Or pulling someone in and saying, hey, I know we had this meeting yesterday. I know you had a couple questions. I want to make sure that you didn't have the perception that I was shutting you down, whether it was because, maybe I didn't have a lot of time, to answer all of the questions that were had, if we were on a tight deadline, or, maybe it was a point that we needed to move forward, or just, hey, I should have taken the time, just owning that as well. I should have taken the time to listen, and I want to give this opportunity and give you some time back to hear what you have to say. So definitely the ability to reflect and be transparent and vulnerable as leaders is very effective. Talk about supportive communication. I want to highlight active listening, very important. Displaying empathy. Key, providing constructive feedback. When we give feedback to our employees, and whether it's to our employees or whether you're giving feedback even to a colleague, we have to be mindful that we're all human. We all make mistakes, and we all started somewhere. And so we want to be careful that we're not giving feedback in a way to shut people down, shut people out, or make anyone feel like a failure. The purpose of feedback is for growth and improvement. And that's something that we all have to keep in mind every day. But then also be reminded, because some of us may have been in situations where we receive feedback and it didn't feel well, and learning from that to ensure that we're not then communicating in that same manner. Now, another question that I'm interested in is, what does healthy accountability as a culture look like to you? And if you think about the accountability culture where you work, maybe even taking some notes for future team meetings or discussions about the accountability culture and what you think within your team should change or can be better. And not being afraid to start with yourself to say, I'm a part of this team. This may not be how I'm holding myself accountable. And because I know I'm not doing that, these are the things that I'm addressing and that I want you all to know as a team that I'm going to strive to do better to make our team stronger. That's huge. It shows maturity professionally, and it also shows that you have respect for your team as well. And just being reminded that everyone contributes to the culture and not just leaders, it's everybody. Okay, next slide. We're going to talk about clarity as the foundation of accountability. Now, clarity is one of the biggest drivers of accountability. When expectations are clear, people know what they're responsible for and what success looks like. Clear expectations definitely reduce errors when employees know exactly what is expected. It's less likely to make a mistake due to uncertainty or a lack of direction. One of the strongest ways to strengthen accountability is by making sure roles are clearly defined. And there are two main points that I want to address. As the sender, we're responsible for communicating expectations clearly. And as the receiver, receivers are responsible for receiving the information and clarifying if there's something that is misunderstood. Okay. I can give an example. I had a staff member one time in a space that I worked, and this staff member had about 2 weeks to get something done. And in my mind, I had clarified, followed up to make sure, we're on track. These are the things that are needed. This is what the deliverable should look like. Now, when I got it back, it was way off. It was not what it was supposed to be by far. And when I asked the employee, you know, this is what we talked about, I followed up just to make sure you said you were good. What happened? And the response that I got was, honestly, I didn't think this is what you wanted, but I wasn't sure and I didn't want to ask. Don't ever do that. Always ask, always clarify. That is very important. As leaders, as peers, as colleagues, it's always best to clarify than misunderstand. The ability to clarify is within your control, right? That's something that you have control over. Simply ask the question, okay? Next slide.
Yeah, Angela, I just want you to know you had some
Oh,
dialogue
did I
in the
did I
chat.
miss some? I'm
Yes. Oh yeah.
sorry.
No, no,
Okay,
no, no
thank
worries.
you.
Look, Angela's into it. Yeah, you just had some
I
dialogue in
am.
here. So regarding the question about the previous slide about healthy accountability and what that looks like as far as a culture. And there's some good responses here, especially I just want to highlight what Miss Kara said, that there is a culture out there across that implies that if you ask the question that you don't know your job. And I've had to intercept that mindset more than once in my career. Questions do show that you care, and I could
Mhm,
just be transparent and relate to that. That sometimes that is what it looks like. Sometimes that you don't know what your job if you do ask questions or ask maybe too many questions.
mhm.
In that case.
And I would say to that, because I do agree for my leaders and colleagues and your peers that are on here, is hopefully this allows some dialogue within your teams. There is an expectation understood. We all have our positions and standards and expectations. However, there should not be a space in our working environment where anyone is fearful of asking questions for fear of, seeming unknowledgeable. Sometimes it's just, I want to make sure that I am delivering the best product, that I am showing up with my best self. And understanding your leaders and understanding the expectation, sometimes you may know that your leadership may have a specific preference or format, etc. It may be time sensitive. And so you're being responsible in making sure that you're getting all of the information up front. And sometimes I would also encourage you in those spaces, maybe the meeting isn't appropriate. If there's ever that feeling, okay, if you walk away with that feeling, that may be the time for you to take the initiative to say, hey, can I follow up with you separate outside of the meeting to have a discussion to share? Because I can even say myself as a leader, there's been times that my staff has brought something to me where I may have communicated something abruptly in a meeting, or as I mentioned, may have, gave the perception of shutting someone down if I'm going through really fast, if my mind is going a million miles a minute. Sometimes it's unintentional, sometimes maybe it is, and it takes us being comfortable enough to make that person self-aware about what happened to ensure that it's not shutting the team down. Um, in addition to that, there was another comment that I saw that was actually really good. Um, Oh, there we go. It was about, thanks, Jenna, making yourself approachable as a leader to ask questions. And I can say that that is our responsibility as well. And I agree. If some of you out there may have worked with me, or heard of me, or we've crossed paths in different places and spaces. And most know that I'm serious more often than not. And in that, though, I had to learn that I had to be approachable. And because I know I'm serious, I'm thinking about things that I will remind myself to ask my staff specific questions to ensure that they understand, to say, hey, if you have a question, it's okay to come ask me. And sometimes I repeat that over and over and over until my staff gets comfortable to know the door is open. Don't get wrapped up in the title, all the things. I'm human just like you. Feel free to come in. Let's have a dialogue about what that question is. That is very important, okay? To do that. So if you're a leader that's not doing that, or you're wondering, like, it's crickets out here, it's silent, but I know people have questions, we have to look within, and that's okay. Sometimes it could be uncomfortable, make us a little uneasy, but understanding that we're responsible and accountable to our staff members just as much as they're accountable to us, and that's really important. Okay, next slide. Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the feedback loop. There's 4 stages in the feedback loop. We have awareness, which is the stage that involves recognizing what needs to be done, clarifying expectations, and understanding one's role in the outcome. We have action, and this stage involves carrying out the tasks, making decisions, and taking ownership of behaviors aligned to the goals. We reflect, which we talked about, involves examining the results of that action, what worked, what didn't, and why. And then we strive to improve, applying insights from reflection to change behaviors, strengthen habits, and better align with expectations. All or most of us should be aware of the recent requirement for conducting 3 progress reviews during the rating period. That was just a recent change. And I hope everyone embraces this transition because it allows us to provide more real-time feedback in the accountability loop with recent examples of what is going well and what improvements can be made. As employees, this is something we should not be afraid of. Don't be afraid of feedback and progress reviews. This is a real opportunity to grow, learn, and strive for excellence in our individual performance and also ensuring mission success. The takeaway is everyone needs feedback. It doesn't matter the seat that you sit in, the level of position that is occupied. Feedback is the key to growth and success. Next slide. Now let's talk about some barriers to accountability. The first barrier is fear or uncertainty. The fear of making a mistake, of being judged, fear of negative repercussions, but that fear creates defensiveness, silence, and withdrawal instead of ownership. And some of us may have felt that before. Probably, I would say, out of all the ones that I've listed, being judged being the underlying factor of in the uncertainty barrier. The second barrier is conflicting priorities. When people have too many tasks or unclear priorities, they often choose what feels urgent rather than what is aligned to the mission outcomes. We all know in our business, the competing priorities are too many. That's kind of the world that we live in. And we have to know how to manage those conflicting priorities, okay? And the third barrier is the lack of clarity. Without clear expectations, responsibilities, timelines, or performance standards. And I agree. I agree with that comment that sometimes it is tough to decipher between urgent and important. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more. As it pertains to uncertainty, to assist, it's definitely important to understand the why. As leaders, sometimes we can give the why and background up front. And sometimes we may not have time to what I call, and yeah, I say to my team, sometimes I don't have time to run through the lilies right then. Like right then, this thing is happening, it's fast, it's quick, and we just need to move out. And then I'll share the why later. Sometimes that happens. And sometimes, as a staff member, being okay with that and just executing. During the uncertain times, always know that someone is asking and that someone is answering. Our responsibility is to support the ask so that our leadership can answer. That answer we give is validating all that we are doing to support veterans. And that's something that we all have to remember. Someone is asking the question at every level within the organization, and someone is required to answer at every level of the organization. And so in that, we may be asking why, why do we have 30 seconds instead of a day? Those are questions we ask. But then also when it comes to urgent and important, something that I ask myself, what's important to me and what's important to my boss, right? Those to me are two, separate things that helps me align my priorities. Is some of these things may only be important to me and my boss may say, okay, these things can be done later. I have to be in tune to know what his priorities are, right? And then work from there. Also, when there are multiple competing priorities, because when we all have lived in that space a long time, it's okay to sometimes ask if there's, three hot things and they all need to be in at 10 a.m. and they all require an extensive amount of time. There's things to do within those, to manage those and prioritize. There's one asking. And when we talk about transparency, it's asking the question, are we able to shift some of the timelines of due dates, but also being transparent in what it's going to take to meet the deadline, okay? Because sometimes individuals may not know what goes into providing that answer, and there may be several layers to get to that thing, and being able to share that to see if there's any wiggle room. My staff would tell you I'm notorious for everything being due yesterday. And sometimes they'll come back and say, okay, this really isn't realistic. And I respect that. And then I'm like, okay, you know what? You're right. Let's shift this deadline. Okay. So being comfortable in doing that. And then sometimes it may just be, well, everything is due. However, you also have to be reminded that in most cases, you're not alone. You have a colleague, you have a peer to say, okay, these things need to be done. You may be a subject matter expert here, and not being afraid to ask for help, because that's also very important, because someone may not have, an abundance of priorities on that given day or time frame to be able to lend a hand. Um, so don't be afraid there either. I think this is a good question, so I'm going to go ahead and address it, and then we'll go on to the next slide. So Deshawn says, what role does trust play in accountability? And I actually think we have a slide on that, but we can go ahead and kind of talk about it now because it's there. So I would say that trust plays a huge role in accountability. When it comes to accountability, I have to trust what you're telling me, and you have to trust the direction that I'm giving, right? And in that, there may be some adjustments, some wiggle room, but in that sphere of accountability, there may be periods of engagement, there may be periods of clarification, there may even be periods of change in direction throughout. But the key is first, individually, I have to be able to look in the mirror and make sure that I know what I'm responsible for. And I have to make sure that I'm showing up every day. Because if I'm not doing that, then as my colleague, as my peer, my leadership chain, the trust is gone if I'm not doing that, right? I am deemed unreliable at that point. And so trust comes by first personally displaying that you can hold yourself accountable to what your responsibilities are, whether that is your own work product, being a part of a team and providing that product, but that starts with us, okay? And so keeping that in mind, that was a great question. Thank you. Okay, so next we're going to talk about the strategies to overcome barriers. So the first step in overcoming barriers is to ensure that we are increasing clarity. People perform better when they know exactly what's expected. As individuals, we build clarity by asking questions. We're confirming deadlines, we're summarizing expectations, we're checking to ensure that we are on one accord, we are in alignment. And as team members, we help each other by setting clear outcomes, timelines, and also measuring our success. The second strategy is prioritization. Many accountability breakdowns happen not because people are unwilling, but because priorities are unclear and constantly shifting, which is something that we just talked about. When everything feels urgent, accountability suffers. The third strategy is building psychological safety. Fear is one of the biggest driver of avoidance, blame, and inaction. As individuals, we can contribute to psychological safety by being honest about our own mistakes, ownership, just saying, my bad, I messed up, and talk about how you're going to fix it if there was something that was misunderstood, etc. But owning it, being honest about our own mistakes first before we go pointing the finger the other way to say, okay, well, this person didn't do that, making sure we check ourselves from within. That's really important. The fourth strategy is creating accountability habits. That could be a commitment tracker, summarizing your progress at the end of the day, setting weekly goals. I can say for me, in the tracker, I write everything down. My memory can be short. A million things are happening throughout the day, so there's not a page in my planner that is not written on. I also understand that when I put things in my planner, that's great for me, but my boss may have 5 other things that trump those things that are in my planner. And that's also being willing to adjust. Okay. That's being flexible and looking at it every day. Like before I leave, what did I get done? Of these things I didn't get done, what has to be a priority tomorrow? Setting expectations for myself. Okay. That's very important. And the final strategy is strengthening the follow through. The follow through is where accountability becomes visible, taking the extra step to document your goals, actions, and deadlines, and sending a confirmation email, blocking task time. Like someone taught me in Teams how to have my focus time. That's my admin time because I know that there's things that I'm accountable to my team that they need. Even if I don't respond to everything, the highlighted things that are urgent or emergent, okay, I'm using my admin time for that. If I have a conversation with one of my team members and we're setting tasks, more often than not, I'm following up with an email. This is what we talked about. These are the timelines. And if you have any questions or concerns, then just stop by my office. Let's have a conversation about it. That's really important. It goes a long way and it also prevents rework. Next slide. Communication as tools for accountability. So we're going to take a closer look at 3 communication tools that directly strengthen personal accountability. Timely updates. Providing updates early and consistently is one of the strongest demonstrations of accountability because it shows that you're paying attention. As a few of my mentors have said, you're inspecting what you expect, staying aware of expectations, and taking responsibility for communicating. Timely updates are not just about announcing completion. You're reporting when you're running behind. Note, when we report that we're running behind, that is not an hour before it's due. And some of us on the call may know someone or are guilty of it ourselves. Reporting when you're running behind should be well in advance. Okay. So, because again, someone is asking the question and someone is answering, meaning someone is dependent upon the thing that you're doing. Okay. Keeping that in mind. Sharing when circumstances have changed, and communicating when a deliverable needs more time or resources. Yes, see, thank you for we're all owning it, okay? So making sure that we're communicating timely. I respect it. Ask for help early. Asking for help early ensures that there's no roadblocks. That allows time for training. That allows time to show you, hey, this is what may have worked in the past. Share some tips and tricks. It reduces errors, it speeds up the progress, and it shows responsibility for outcomes, not just tasks. Third, we want to be transparent. Okay, we want to share when priorities shift. We may need help and say there's multiple things going on that have come down, maybe were unexpected. Be transparent about those shifts. Acknowledge when something didn't go as planned. I thought this was going to work. I thought, this thing that I was going to deliver was going to meet expectation, but I learned in a different meeting, I now have to pivot. Acknowledge those things. And then also being honest about capacity or workload. I am guilty of that, and I will own it that sometimes, most times, I'm not honest about my capacity, and I will say yes. And then I'm like, okay, and I figure it out and adjust. But if it gets to the point where you stretch your capacity beyond realistic expectations, you will find that it leads to burnout, incomplete products, etc. So when it gets to that point, then again, as I mentioned earlier, the goal is to reassess your yes. Reassessing your yes still means that you're successful. You're just being honest and transparent, because sometimes we have to say no, and that's okay to say no, because we have thousands of other bright colleagues in the agency that can maybe fulfill that ask, okay? So ask yourself, which of these communication tools is hardest for you or your team? Is it being transparent, asking for help early, or the timely updates? Learning to say no. It is hard. I am right there with you, in a work in progress. I'll probably be working on it the rest of my career, but that's okay. Most of us probably will. Next slide. Now we'll quickly talk about a few team accountability practices as we shift from personal accountability to team accountability, because even the strongest individual performers thrive when the team around them is aligned mutually and supportive. And there are three core practices that help teams create a healthy culture. Sharing standards. That includes shared expectations for quality, timelines, communication, and follow through. Peer accountability. This one is key. It means respectfully holding each other to shared commitments, not just relying on a supervisor to intervene. This doesn't mean policing or calling people out in a harmful way. This peer accountability can be detrimental to the team. As a part of a team, we're all responsible for showing up. We're all responsible for pulling our weight. And showing up and pulling our weight is not assigning tasks to one another and then saying, oh, I can't. Oh, can you do this? If you're assigned a task and maybe that's not your area of expertise, saying, hey, I can take this on. I may need some training in it to make sure that I'm not a hindrance to the team, or I want to make sure that we still meet this deadline, or not waiting until the day before that item is due, that deliverable to whomever, and it's not done. But also, if there is something that is happening in your team that needs to be discussed, sometimes it's best not to have that discussion in a group. Maybe it's best, more often than not, to pull that person aside and say, hey, can we talk about this? As a team member, you may feel frustrated and say, I'm frustrated right now because I have a feeling, or my perception is that I'm pulling more weight, or there's a lack of communication, and having that one-on-one dialogue to give a different perspective outside of the group. That should hopefully, in that other person's professional maturity, yield a respect and some self-reflection on how they can come to the table and present their best selves, okay? And then we talk about reinforcing mutual trust, which is consistently showing reliability, honesty, and openness about what those challenges are. In our environment where our mission impacts veterans and their families, reinforcing trust is not an option. It's essential to mission success. Okay, so that's key because at whatever we're doing, whether we're completing something individually or collectively, we're responsible to veterans. Okay, that is why we're here. That is why we exist, and so we always have to keep that in mind. That can never go away. That always has to be the main reason that we're showing up every day. Next slide. Okay, and then lastly, we are going to just talk about a little bit of personal action planning. We have talked a lot about accountability today, and there is a lot to unpack, but not in a negative way. The goal of the discussion is to shift our mindset. Whether it is you're a supervisor and we now have the accountability critical element in our performance standard, whether we're an employee now receiving the three progress reviews within the performance here. Regardless of those things, we should always come to work. We should always show up with the goal of doing our best, with the goal of completing, supporting, communicating to the best of our ability. And so all of us work differently in identifying those things that are going to hold us to the standard, right? That are going to keep us accountable to ourselves and our team. So whether that's you want to identify strengths and gaps, to take a moment to honestly assess where you're already strong, but then the areas that you need improvement. That's no judgment. That's your own personal safe space with yourself to say, these are the spaces that I'm great, that I can pop my collar a little bit and I'm good. But then there may be on the other side, like these are some areas, okay, I need to adjust and tweak some things and hold yourself to that. Setting measurable goals is always great. Setting goals that are specific and trackable instead of saying, I'll be more accountable. Well, how are you going to be more accountable? So does it maybe look like I'll send weekly status updates every Friday by noon? It's very specific and it's measurable to know, are you making improvement or not? Third, set accountability checkpoints. Whether that's regularly check-ins with yourself, you can do it daily, bi-weekly, monthly. I think it's a little bit too long, but making sure that you're checking in with yourself to say, how am I doing? But then also being vulnerable, we've used that word, and transparent enough to also maybe ask your supervisor, talk to your colleagues, am I doing better in this space? If you could assess me, okay? And having that conversation, perception is reality, right? Externally. And so just a pulse check within your team to say, hey, I've been working on this. Do you see a difference? Do you see a change? And being willing to take that feedback, it makes a difference. So today, next slide. Again, we learned a lot and we talked a lot about personal accountability and the impact to mission success. We explore behaviors that strengthen accountability, how communication supports ownership, and the importance of identifying strengths and gaps. As we wrap up, I want you to remember that accountability is a daily choice. Small actions, consistent follow through, proactive communication, owning your role, and creating major results for the mission. Additionally, I look forward to more intimate dialogue with those of you who may have signed up for one of the 2 upcoming intersessions as we continue to discuss personal accountability. It's been a pleasure. Thank you. Nafi, the floor is yours.
All right, clap it up. I just need to see nothing but reactions from everybody because wow, right? Yes, I love seeing it. Awesome, awesome. So again, thank you so much, Ms. Briscoe, for this excellent presentation, and thank you all for attending. As Ms. Briscoe alluded to, she will have 2 intersessions in February. So again, remember the criteria is that you would have attended this session for a minimum of 30 minutes to receive credit. You'll get an email from me that will give you instructions on how to register for the 2 intersessions. And then again, March is our next seed session. It's didn't say intersession, but feel free to register for that. It's open. It's ready. It's the Opportunity Lens: Seeing Potential in Every Organizational Shift by Ms. Teria Dowdy. So attend that in March on the 3rd. Again, thank you all for coming today. Have a safe Black History Month. And again, here's the evaluation. I'm going to drop that into the chat. Please give us the feedback. We want to hear from you about today's session. And again, thank you all for coming today. Take care. Be safe.